H-1B cap registration strategy is critically important, and that's what we're talking about on today's episode of Live at Lunch. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law. We serve clients throughout the United States and from around the world with U.S. employment-based and family-based immigration matters. So today we're talking about the H-1B cap registration process, which is here. Like it or not, ready or not, it is here. If you don't feel ready, that's absolutely okay. We are here to help. So today we're talking about the importance of strategy and the registration process. The reason it's so important, especially this year, is because of the new weighted selection process, which as far as we know is going to be in place. It is in the regulations. The regulations are final. There is some litigation around it, but as best we know, it will be in place for this year's registration process. So we are proceeding as if, because the cap window, the registration window opens March 4th, which is less than a month away at this point. So why is strategy so important, and how can you best approach this? If you are an employer who's sponsoring a foreign national employee for the H-1B registration process this year, if you're an HR professional working through this, if you are an individual for a national, it's important that you understand the strategy that goes behind it and why it's so important, and what your role is as the employer or HR professional or foreign national, and what our role is as the immigration lawyers assisting with the process. So the process, the strategy is so important because of the weighted selection. If you have not heard about the weighted selection process, it means that now in this year's H-1B lottery process, registrations that are assigned a wage level 4 will have 4 entries, wage level 3 will have 3 entries, wage level 2 will have 2 entries, wage level 1 will have 1 entry. So basically, the selection process will, they say, favor, because of this process, it will favor positions that have a higher wage, meaning wage level 4 versus wage level 1, just because of the way that the system is now set up. So what are these wage levels? These wage levels refer to the prevailing wage levels that are set by the Department of Labor. So there's a database that you can look at if you're interested, where we use, that's a database that we use, USCIS uses, the Department of Labor uses it to determine what the required wage will be for a specific position. So in order to determine what the wage level will be for the registration, and by the way, this is fun, we do not have from USCIS the interface. We don't know exactly what the new system will look like. We don't know precisely per their system the information that they will be asking for. We know because we can read the regulations and we have a solid idea of what they're going to need. But the interface from USCIS, the new interface with this weighted selection process, has not been rolled out yet. So we're still waiting for that. But the information that we'll need for the weighted selection process, or for the weighted selection entries into the cap, are the SOC code, that stands for the standard occupational code, and the wage level. So standard occupational code refers to a code in this database that I refer to, the Department of Labor database. Not every occupation in the world, or not every job title rather in the world, is listed. There's not going to be a directly corresponding SOC code for every position or every job title that exists. Some are pretty straightforward, right? So if you are a physician, a veterinarian, an accountant, a lawyer, those are pretty straightforward to determine what the appropriate SOC code would be. There are others that are more interdisciplinary, or just a bit more, I don't know if cutting edge is the right word, but not quite as straightforward, where it's possible that one or more SOC codes could be appropriate. The other aspect, like I said, for weighted selection is the wage level. So once you identify the appropriate specific occupational code, or standard occupational code, rather, there are 4 wage levels within every SOC code. Those wage levels range from 1 to 4, like I said. So for every SOC code, there's a set of 4 wage levels. Wage level 1 is meant for entry-level positions within that occupation, right? So, and then wage level 4 is for senior-most positions within that particular occupation. And then wage levels 2 and 3 are in between. There is a matrix that Department of Labor uses to determine a wage level. And that absolutely can be helpful when we, as immigration law professionals and our clients, are determining the appropriate wage level. So there's guidance available out there, but generally speaking, like I said, wage level 1 is for entry level positions, wage level 4 is for senior most positions. So how do we go about selecting this standard occupational code? Like I said, that is our job, or I am saying now, that is our job to assist clients with that process of selecting the appropriate standard occupational code. And that's tremendously important because that in turn, a couple of reasons, that in turn will determine what the wage is. And then from there, we select the appropriate wage level. And it's important to select the appropriate SOC code because USCIS could challenge it. Let's say that you enter a registration in the H-1B cap, it's selected. It's possible if you select the wrong SOC code that USCIS would challenge it. And they would, and I've seen this happen before in requests for evidence and denials from cases that we haven't filed, but that people have brought to us after the fact. Anyway, it's possible for USCIS to challenge the SOC code and say, look, really these job duties are aligned with this other SOC code, and that's what you should have selected. So it is important that you select the appropriate SOC code as best we can from the very beginning and be ready to defend that and explain why that's the appropriate SOC code. So in order to determine the SOC code, we look at the job title. USCIS says that that's not as big of a factor. I think it's, let's look at it, right? Let's make sure it's roughly aligned with the SOC code, but we look at the job title. More importantly, we look at the job duties that are required for the position. We also look at, so those are the factors that we look at for also the requirements for the position. It goes more to wage levels, but we also want to know, generally speaking, what type of degree is required. So a bachelor's degree has to be required for an H-1B position. Otherwise, it's not H-1B eligible. But the question that I want to know is what type of degree does the employer typically require for this type of position? And that can help us determine the appropriate SOC code. It's one of the factors that we consider. So in order to determine the right SOC code or an appropriate SOC code, we look at the job title and job duties, also the requirements for the position. In order to determine the wage level, one of the things that we look at, one of the things that is relevant in determining, not necessarily the wage level, but in determining what the wage data that we're looking at should be, is the geographical location, the actual address where the H-1B beneficiary will work. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that all of this information that we're talking about, the job title, the job duties, the requirements, the job site location, work site location rather, is relevant to the H-1B position, which the foreign national does not have to have right now as of the time of filing. It has to be available. There has to be a position that exists and is available for the person, but it does not have to, that foreign national does not have to be working in that position right now. That means that you could be, as an employer, you could be sponsoring someone maybe who's working for a different employer at the moment, and you are sponsoring them or registering them in the H-1B cap, or it could be a situation where you are employing them now. Maybe they're working on OPT, for example, right now, and the position they have right now is maybe not quite the same as the position they will have when they are in H-1B status. So that's an important distinction. It can be the same position, but it does not have to be. So that's an important distinction. But in terms of the wage data that we're looking at, the worksite location is tremendously important. So that does not mean necessarily where is the employer's office. It does not mean where's the employer headquartered. It does not necessarily mean where is the end client. If there's an end client situation, if it's like a consulting type position and the H-1B beneficiary is going to be working on a project for an end client, it's not necessarily where is the end client worksite. The question is, where will that H-1B beneficiary actually work? So in 2026, that could be at the employer's office or at the employer's headquarters or at the end client site. It also could be working from home. It could be working remotely. So it's important to determine exactly what that worksite location is going to be, because that will determine in turn the wage data that we're looking at, because the wage data is set based on geographic location. Department of Labor does surveys. I don't know the exact details of how they go about doing those surveys, but they do wage surveys. So the amount that an accountant, for example, is paid, just in general, like putting aside this whole immigration process, in general, the average, if you will, amount that an entry-level accountant is paid is going to be different in Richmond, Virginia than it is in Seattle, Washington, which will be different from San Diego and different from Chicago and any number of other areas. So as you know, cost of living varies depending on the area that you're living in. So that is factored in. So that's the reason that geographic location is so important. So one of the questions we're getting a lot from clients right now is, how do I do this? How do I know what information you need? And how do I know how to determine all this? That is our job. That's what we're here for. So if you are working with us as a client of Sumner Immigration on an H-1B cap registration or multiple registrations, we are walking you through the process step by step. So the first step is, of course, to sign the engagement letter if you have not already. We will then, you'll be directed to a link to confirm corporate information. We need some basic corporate information. Then we need basic information about the position that's being offered. So this information that I'm talking about, the job title, job duties, the requirements for the position, the work site location, so that we can then help you, work with you to help determine the appropriate SOC code, the appropriate, determine what wage data we're looking at, and then determine the appropriate wage level. So that is not something you're doing alone. We are walking alongside our clients step by step based on the information that they give us to help them determine that appropriate information. So that is why we're here. You are not alone in doing this. And we are walking clients through this step by step by step. We have online streamlined questionnaires to make the process as easy as possible for everyone. So again, we have a questionnaire to gather information about the specific position. Then we also have a questionnaire for the H-1B potential beneficiary. So we want to make sure that we want to look at their educational background and their qualifications. And we want to look at their immigration history to see if there's anything in their immigration history, as best we can, that would potentially cause a problem in changing their status if they're here in the United States right now. So that is why it's tremendously important. That's the strategy that goes into the H-1B registration process. And like I said, if you are an employer or an individual H-1B foreign national beginning this process, or if you're in the middle of it, we are here to help you walk through the process step by step. It's not something that you have to figure out yourself at all. Give us the information to the best of your ability, and then we will help you walk through this analysis and strategy. It is important to keep in mind that the information that we submit in the H-1B registration should not change. When I say information, I mean things like the job title and SOC code and the worksite location and wage level. Those should not change, ideally, between the time that we do the registration and the time that we file the H-1B petition. So it is not a great look. And I'm surmising here because nobody has been through this process before, right? This is a totally new process and we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it is not a good idea. And I'm saying this as an immigration lawyer, not a good idea to submit information in the registration and then to change it by the time you get around to submitting the H-1B petition. The reason I say that is you don't want to look like you're trying to game the system. You don't want to say with the H-1B registration process, oh yes, this person's going to be working as a software developer, wage level 4 in rural Iowa, just making this up. And then you turn around and say, oh, just kidding. He's actually going to be working in Washington, D.C., still as a software developer, but at wage level 2. We don't know exactly how USCIS would treat that, but I believe that would raise red flags and could cause the denial of the petition if there's a big change. I'm not saying you are married to this information forever and ever, amen, but you do have to be really careful and intentional when we're setting that criteria for the registration. So I hope that you have found this information helpful. If so, please share this video with a family member, friend, or colleague. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss our next video. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law, serving clients around the world and around the United States with employment-based and family-based immigration matters. I hope you'll join us next Tuesday for our next Live at Lunch. Until then.